And we're live.
Thank you very much, Ian. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are. What an absolute treat it is, once again, to get to talk to Ann Cleeves on the day before publication day in the US. Is it the same day in the UK, Ann?
No, in the UK, it's always a Thursday, but I'm here in London because I'm doing a very early radio live thing on the Today program, which if you've been into the UK or maybe have listened to, it's a big news program. So I'm very excited about that, to meet some of my heroes.
Wonderful. Well, it does go on sale tomorrow, so this is as close as we get to it. This is Ann's virtual book launch in the United States.
And I'm very glad to be doing it with you, Barbara.
We had the pleasure of having Ann at the store last August after, or maybe it was early September. Anyway, after VoucherCon in San Diego.
That's right.
It was right around the turn of the month, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, it was.
Right. Anyway, and at that point, what was the book we were talking about last year?
The Raging Storm, which was a Matthew Venn book.
Got it. And this is the 11th, Vera Stanhope. But, you know, since the publisher thoughtfully lists the titles of Ann's books inside, I noticed that, you know, Vera gets her own name, but your other two series don't get names, they get places. The Shetland series and the Two Rivers series, which is Matthew. Do you have any idea why?
I think because they're very distinctive places. Shetland is such an, as you know, because you visited, such an unusual and beautiful place. And then North Devon too, where those two rivers meet in the estuary, is very special too. So I think the geography in both those series is important.
Well, I think that readers, I've thought about Vera because sadly, as you mentioned, this is going to be the last series of Vera in production, is it at the moment?
It is. It's just finished filming, so it was very sad. Yes, they filmed in the studio very close to where I live, so I was able to go onto set for the last 2 days, and just to thank everybody really, because the cast and crew have been wonderfully welcoming. I think because I don't meddle, I'm always been very welcome on set, and it's just great to see them. And it was like a family was breaking up. And then we had a big wrap party as well in the football stadium, in one of the hospitality suites in the big football stadium, St. James's Park in Newcastle, where Newcastle United play. And that was very fitting too. And a beautiful cake. It's
unusual to have a TV series go for as many seasons as Vera has. Almost impossible. And of course, Brenda is so identified with this. There's really not any way you could continue it.
No, I don't think so. And I think I would much rather it ended while people still want it to continue. There's such affection for the show. There are location tours now. I was hearing that people come to the Northeast, especially to go on the coach parties to see Holy Island and to come to Whitley Bay. And that's lovely too, because it's brought new people into a region that not very many people have visited.
Well, I was actually going to say that I imagine most Americans, what they know of Northumberland is from watching Vera.
Yeah, and they see how beautiful it is, which is stunning. Yeah.
I was
I just wandered into my local bookshop yesterday, and there was a Dutch travel journalist in there who was there wanting to write about Vera country. So that was lovely to be able to meet him and take him for a little walk around the town and show him where everything was. And that was just by chance. He just happened to wander in.
It is gorgeous country. I've only been there once, had the pleasure of hiking along part of Hadrian's Wall, not the entire thing, which would take more time and stamina that at that time I had. Newcastle's a really interesting city. The Bay Area is great. I'm trying to remember, is the coast to coast walk in, does it go across Northumbria or does it go across Yorkshire?
There is a coast path that goes up most of Northumberland too. Yeah. Beautiful wide open beaches and lovely moorland and very interesting market towns, and the city of Newcastle, which is really buzzy now, regenerated through culture mostly. And then there are pockets of deprivation where we used to have the coal mines and we don't anymore, and we used to make ships and we don't do that anymore. So for a writer, it's perfect county to write about because there are so many different backgrounds to choose from. And in The Dark Wives, I start off on the more deprived area on the coast and then move inland to the more rural, affluent bit of the county.
Well, but I think that's what makes the books and the TV interesting. It reminds me some of Peter Robinson's series, which, was really encompassed Yorkshire. I mean, Peter in the books sometimes even went to London or whatever, but the TV stuck, with all those gorgeous views of Yorkshire.
That's right, of the Dales.
Yep. And before we talk about the book, one last thing. My husband and I stumbled, I think, on BritBox, possibly while we were, I can't remember, is Vera on BritBox?
Yes. Yeah, I think she is now.
Okay, so I think it was while looking to see if Vera was actually posted or possibly rewatching all the seasons. There's a new one called After the Flood. And I'm not sure where it is, but it is clearly in an area where there's a narrow river valley, loads of water coming down, and, bad actors, oftentimes evil developers or people, that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is one of the best written series that I have watched it, and we're not done, so I don't really know how it's going to come out, but we both
Yeah, I've just started watching that too, and it is very good. Yeah, I think it's Yorkshire it's set in, but perhaps further south than the Peter Robinson stories.
Right, but anyway, I think Americans have a real affinity for at least watching the British countryside, even if we don't necessarily go through it. So The Dark Wives, Rosebank, is it modeled on an actual care home, or is this an entirely fiction?
No, the book came about because I'd listened to a documentary again on radio. I'm a great talk radio fan. And there was a documentary about care homes for troubled teenagers or for children, but mostly it's a lot easier to find foster parents or adoptive parents for younger kids. It's very difficult if they're 13 up. And so quite a lot of them are in very small care homes. But since I started working in social work, they've all been privatized now, or most of them have been privatized now. And I do feel very queasy about a company making profit out of our troubled teenagers. And I suppose, and this documentary was very hard hitting and looking at some of the companies that were actively corrupt and really just out to make a profit and not to look after the kids that were in their care, even though they are regulated. And that just triggered an idea for a book for me. And so, no, it's all made up, but based quite a lot on that original documentary.
We have had similar situations here. There's a real scandal about care homes for Native American alcoholics or possibly also other substance abusers, and what a terrible fraud it turned out to be for these private homes. And, COVID exposed that private nursing homes were often corrupt, or it maybe less corrupt than just inept and indifferent might have been, a better choice. And we've privatized a lot of prisons here, and I'm with you. I feel really unhappy at the thought that a private company is running our prisons. So
it's the same with
us.
us.
True in the UK?
It is now. Yes, that's a relatively recent thing too. Yeah, so I wanted to just look at, I suppose since COVID, I think teens have had a really tough time because a lot of them couldn't go to school. People who are coming into their teenage years now. And it's hard for the schools because they're landed with this bunch of teenagers who missed out on that socializing in the first couple of years of high school, of what we call high school, our secondary school. So from the ages of 11 till 13, their education was completely disrupted. And now they're age 15, 16. And it's hard. It's really hard because they're having to adjust. And for teachers, it's hard because they're expected to get the same sort of results as they used to. And I wanted to just show a sparky, interesting, but troubled teenage lass. And that's what I hope I do in Chloe Spence.
I think you do. And you're so right that, part of the reason for schooling, whether it's public school or private school, is indeed socialization. Getting kids out of their family home and, forcing them to figure out how to interact with their peers. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
the same way about our puppies. We take them to doggy daycare. It makes them less nervous, whatever. So even college here, I thought, I was so young. I was only 17 when I went 2,000 miles away from Chicago to Palo Alto. And
Yeah.
I found that was the hardest part. Wasn't the school part, the academic part, but just trying to navigate living alone without guardrails from parents. And I remember I got a credit card, and as anyone does with a new credit card, ran into debt. My father was very kind to me. He said, I will pay this off, he said, but part of the reason you have this card is so that you can learn that it is not a magic ticket, to whatever you want. You're going to
Yeah.
have to live within your allowance. So that was just like one little step, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, Rosebank, tell us about your teenager.
Yeah, she's called Chloe Spence. She's 14. And the first we know about her is a little bit of a diary because the very sympathetic care worker who ends up being murdered has encouraged her to write down her feelings. And so Vera knows her through just a couple of pages of the diary, but is behind her, and she really doesn't want Chloe to be the murderer. So this lad who's the care worker, young student who's doing it in his part-time, working for an agency, is found murdered outside. Chloe has disappeared. So the obvious implication is that she's the murderer. But Vera really doesn't want that to be the case. She's there battling for Chloe. And it's I suppose, a kind of not quite a road movie story, but they're trying to find this girl throughout the book, as well as find out who killed Josh Woodburn, the murdered victim.
So who was he? Who was, there always needs to be, I think, a reason for the victim, not just a handy straw man, but a person who actually either does or doesn't need to be murdered.
Yeah, and I think it's quite we won't go into any spoilers, but
No.
I think it's quite sad the outcome of the case.
Well, I do too. And so, there are various theories about what Chloe is doing. Is she the murderer? Was she just frightened and went into hiding? Was she an actual witness to the crime? It could have been all kinds of things. But so I felt like Vera really identified with her. I mean, Vera did not have an easy teenage time either.
No, that's right. I think that's why she is so sympathetic to this child who's aggressive, challenging at school. The school can't really get a handle on her and can't understand her, and she doesn't fit in at all with what they want her to do, which is to be compliant and do as she's told and carry on with the work. And she's got troubles, her dad's left and her mum's got mental health issues, and that's why she's in care. But that there seems to be no allowance made for that, and no kindness. I think Vera is always on the side of the kind people.
I think she is too. One of my favorite Veras is the one where she got sucked into um, one of the Stanhope residences. I mean, it was kind of your
Yeah,
version of an Agatha Christie
the darkest
house
evening.
murder. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that I thought was a place where we could really see what Vera's early life, had been about, how difficult it was for her, what her father was like, what her relatives, what her family is like. So
yeah. So she is sympathetic, I think, to the outsider and to the people who are awkward and edgy and can't fit in.
So fortunately, her rank is high enough that she can actually stomp her foot and stand up for things where perhaps a lower ranking officer would not be listened to. So, is this as high as Vera's ever going to reach in the police detective superintendent? She's not going to go on to become like a commander or a chief constable or whatever.
Well, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen in the film how how they're going to end it, because I haven't seen the final script. So
Oh,
although it will be the Dark Wives, they are filming the Dark Wives as the final episode. But I don't know. They quite often twist it, so I'm not quite sure how they're going to turn that into the last of the series. But
they're certainly not going to kill her off, or there will be rioting. So
well, I don't know. I have no idea what they're going to do with her.
wow. I remember how relaxed you were at letting Shetland go. I mean, I remember you said to me that you had said all you wanted to say about the Shetland series and about, well, I think of it as whatever Douglas Henshaw's actual role. I mean, what was his
Jimmy
name?
Perez.
Thank you, Jimmy. And you were okay with him taking it off in some direction that they
Absolutely. Yeah.
wanted
I
to.
really love the new actor. I love it. Ashley Jensen as Ruth Calder in it. And I like the relationship between the two women. And there are two more series of Shetland being filmed. So,
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I was always crazy about Tosh. I think she's a
yeah.
marvelous character. And the other people in the little force there, I thought,
Yeah.
so often series you talk about Brenda, and it is true. She is the heart of Vera in the same way that Douglas Henshaw was, as Jimmy Perez. But don't you think to a great degree the series also rise and fall on the supporting cast?
Oh,
How
I
good
think
they
so.
are.
Yeah, and I think people have a great love of Kenny, who's put upon and who's at the end of his career and who is just takes everything that Vera throws at him, but he's still there, and I think people love that from him.
Yes. And
And I've
he's,
introduced a new character in this book called Rosie Bell, and I've enjoyed writing about her too.
well, I was thinking that, one of the things you realize in this book is how that whole team is really grieving Holly.
Yeah, yeah, and that's important, isn't it, to be able to show the reality of loss and grief. People don't just shake it off and start all over again.
That's right. Well, I mean, she was a part of the team and, it's like family to be a team. They don't necessarily observe standard hours. They're not necessarily paid all that well, why are they all doing the job? And part of it, I think, is the way they relate to each other, the support they give to each other.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that as well, I wanted to show how hard it is to come into a team like that are so cohesive and so. And in a way, that's a bit like a film crew or a film set, because you do get the sense that these actors are one of the props guy who works in Vera, who's been there, I think, from the beginning. He's a local chap, said to me once, what you need to understand is that we're like a family here. Big pause. And Brenda is the matriarch.
Well, I think that's undoubtedly true. But, that's another thing that various British policing shows and so forth on other British novels, it's harder for women in the police. There's, it's in the one I just mentioned after the flood, the young
Mm.
pregnant wife is having a hard time because nobody actually wants her to be solving the crime. And so, Vera on her own has kind of blasted the glass ceiling. But
I think so. Yeah, expects especially a woman who doesn't dress in a sharp suit and doesn't wear heels and doesn't really care what she looks like. And I think that's what makes her stand out. It's quite easy. It's a lot easier to fit in a man's world if you're prepared to play the part. And she really isn't prepared to play the part.
I think everybody will think of her Macintosh and Camp, I mean, that pretty much you could sort of blank out her face and still it's almost like Sherlock Holmes, there's
Yeah.
the pipe and the deerstalker and all. And I think with Vera, we all think of her with that hat and the coat.
Yeah,
So
very, very clever costume design there, I think.
nobody would call her well dressed, but underneath it, oh, sorry, let me get rid of that. I always forget to turn my phone off. Matthew Venn, so, moving in that direction of somebody that might have a hard time fitting in, you decided to make him a gay policeman and, the various questions that come along or problems that come along with that. Did Vera in a way inspire you to do that? I mean, you know, a person who didn't actually fit in?
I think Matthew Venn came along quite unexpectedly. I decided that I'd never really thought about writing a book set in Devon because although that's where I grew up, North Devon, but the more remote bit of Devon, because I thought people would think immediately of cream teas and thatched cottages and would expect it to be very cozy.
Right.
And so I write traditional crime fiction, but I don't think I write that sort of cozy crime fiction. And so, but I went there soon after my husband died. I went and ran away to where my best friend lives. So who I was at school with, I'd known since we were 12, and she still lives there, and went down and spent some time with her and thought that, and it was February and it was blowing a gale and it was freezing cold and it was raining and it wasn't a bit cozy. It wasn't a bit chocolate box Devon. And I thought, well, I would actually quite like to set a series here, and started getting an idea because Sue had grown up within a very strict evangelical community. And so that triggered the idea, the thought that if you'd grown up within that sort of family and then lost your faith quite suddenly and dramatically and publicly, you would be cast out, you would be unfellowshipped. And that someone that had happened to might turn to the police service to find a sort of sense of duty and honor and belonging. And so I had that character in my head. But then the people who looked after me most after Tim died, who fed me tea and wine and let me cry on their shoulders, were a gay couple, Martin and Paul, and they were still very much in my head when I was there. And they were friends of Sue's too, when she'd come to stay with me. And so that's how Matthew became gay, really, just because they were there. And I think he was always meant to be gay because that explained his uneasiness and why reconciliation with his family was so difficult and so troubled.
Absolutely. Plus, you know, there is that sort of unease or distrust among his colleagues that, you know, no matter how enlightened everybody is, can come up. I thought The Raging Storm, I do think, I didn't just thought it, I think it, was one of your best plots. I thought it was a remarkable book. It's not that often that I get left behind, but I really didn't see the end of that book coming. And there were so many different aspects to it, you know. I mean, it's a very complex novel. Is that series not going to continue on TV?
I don't think so because Ben Aldridge, who played Matthew, he went off to Hollywood, I think. I think he got seduced by bigger and better things, so I don't think he's around to play him. I think the option runs out very soon, so I think there's a possibility that we might find somebody else who's willing to take it on, and that would be interesting.
Well, it's gorgeous countryside, and I think, you know, it's a brilliant background for television, but you just illustrate, you know, what we started talking about earlier, that if one person is, you know, encapsulates the series like Brenda, you can almost not. I thought Shetland worked really well because the rest of the cast was so strong and so supportive. You could, you know, you could have Jimmy decide he'd had enough and retire, or get married or marry somebody who didn't want him to be a policeman, is I think what actually happened there.
Yeah.
You know, I've had these conversations with Diana because they're filming or about to film, I can't remember where they are, season 8, which will be the final season of Outlander. Meantime, she has not yet written the final book. So she's engaged in writing a script for one of them. And I've said to her, you know, how do you see this working? You know, because it's gonna finish and fans are going to identify with that, but you haven't actually written the book. So how will that go? And part of the reason that it has to stop is that both Sam and Katrina have become such stars, you know, that they want to go on and do other things. So there's a danger in having an actor so identified with your series that they decide they want to move on. There you are.
Yeah. Well, I think so. And I think, you know, 2 series is pretty lucky. 3 was a bit greedy. So I think I've done very well.
I don't think
television.
greedy is it at all. I think what it really means is that you write great stories in great locations and people absolutely love them. So now if anybody's greedy, it's your fans, it's not you. I love them. I thought I really enjoyed it. I think this is a wonderful series. I mean, it has some aspects that are familiar from your other series, and then, there are things that are original. And, you have experience with long series. There were what, seven? How many Shetlands are there? This is the 11th Vera. There's seven, is that right?
There are 8
Eight
Shetlands, yeah.
Shetlands, and now three of the others. So, um,
Yeah, I'll certainly write more Matthew Venn. I'm just about to start one now. But in between the Dark Wives and the new Matthew Venn, there's a standalone
is
um,
there?
set in Orkney that I'm working on at the moment. Yeah.
Wow. So is that scary, but also exciting?
Yeah, very exciting. Yeah, I'm having great fun doing that. I
Oh,
love Orkney too. I don't know it as well as Shetland, but I went up and spent some time up there and got to know it quite well.
yeah, I've only been there once, so but yes, I think that the Scottish Islands are remarkable. I'm trying to think who it is that wrote a book on one of the islands, and just the description of the difficulties of living in a place that remote, and yet the joys of it was remarkable. So I think, is Shetland visited more often than Orkney?
I don't think so. I think Orkney's a lot easier to get to. It's much closer to the mainland, so and there are more ferries, so it's actually more accessible than Shetland is. So no, I
But when
think I think
watching
Kirkwall
Shetland,
gets more.
sorry, I was just going to say, when watching Shetland, they seem to move back and forth fairly easily. Is it
Yeah.
Aberdeen is that where the ferries
The
are?
ferry is 14 hours though. It takes 14
Wow.
hours on the ferry from Aberdeen up to Shetland.
Okay, so
And you could do the top of Scotland to Orkney in 3. So it's a bit different.
yeah, no, absolutely. So, have you ever thought about like motoring on up to the Faroe Islands, or
I've never been there. I'd have
oh,
to go there.
it really would be remarkable. The first time I was ever there was, I think, in 1991, and it was dark, and it was so poor, and they were actually still eating puffins, which was very hard to accommodate, sort of like a different version of Kentucky Fried Chicken or something. Next time I went around, the whole thing was completely changed. We were there with a festival where everybody was, dazzling in native dress, and it has turned into this sort of locavore location where people actually travel there to eat not puffins, but local food. And they've restored a lot of the villages. They have a remarkably beautiful church, and it's become quite a tour stop as people are
Place
going
to
on up to Iceland.
Yeah, well, Brenda and I will be in Iceland in November, which will be fun. We've both been invited to go to Iceland Noir, which is a lovely crime writing festival in Reykjavik, organized by Ragnar Jonasson. So yeah, we'll both be there, which will be good.
You will love that. I hear such wonderful things about it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is scheduled right before the Thanksgiving holiday here, when all US publishers are trying to cram stuff at us because they know that there's going to be this big break. I have always wanted to go, but it's a very long.
Well, I've been 3 times, I think, before, and it's a very lovely place, but a very, very friendly festival too. They have great names there. Anthony Horowitz goes most years, I think. And when I was there a couple of years ago, Ian Rankin was there. And yeah, it's a big draw.
Oh, absolutely.
Louise Penny went a couple of years ago too.
She did. I mean, it's a gorgeous country. I've been to Iceland several times, but three, four times, but never have been able to go in November. It's been more of a summer. Anyone who lives in Phoenix tries to go north, if at all possible, with
Yes.
the summer. So anyway, but so do you get outside of Reykjavik? Do you go to any of the surrounding areas?
Yeah, I did. The last time I was there, the Icelanders organize a kind of road trip for people who want to travel out. So either regular people who go all the time or for friends. And I've known Ragnar and Ursa for years and years now. So yeah, so that was fun. They did us. The weather was abominable. It wasn't snowy, it was raining. It just rained the whole time. So mostly what I can remember is getting very, very wet. But we did go to the black beach with the black sand and the volcanic sand where everybody goes, and we walked through waterfalls, which was not very different from just walking through the rain, and ate lots of good food and drank a lot of beer, I think.
Right. Well, and they have one of the highest literacy rates in the whole world. Very impressive. And Ragnar, he translates Agatha Christie into Icelandic. And I just read his new book, Death in the Sanatorium, which is coming out shortly. And it's translated. The translator gets some billing, which is good because August has been women in translation. But I thought to myself, okay, if he can translate Agatha Christie into Icelandic, surely he could translate his own book, for the.
No, I think you need to translate into your native language. It's very different. I think I've talked to quite a number of translators because I love translated, especially crime fiction. And I think you do, no matter how fluent you are in the language that you're translating into, you need to be a native speaker to do it properly.
Okay.
And I think at first Ragnar used Quentin Bates, who's a crime writer himself and was a friend, and he did the first few. But it's an art, and I love going to Iceland because I'm translated into Icelandic. I've got a great publisher there called Jakob. Yeah, so I'll be lovely to catch up with. He publishes Louise too, so be able to catch up with him.
Lovely. Ragnar and his wife and children have been to visit us. I have a wonderful photo of them cavorting in the poison pen, which is great. And thanks to the wonders of Zoom, we do get to talk to him. Once you master the time difference, then it's really
Yeah.
easy after that. So anyway, so there will be. Is the standalone going to come before the next Matthew Venn or after?
Yeah, so it'll be this time next year, I guess.
So have you found that not writing a series book and having to start and make up a whole thing all over again, has that been really fun for you?
Yeah, I just had a wish to go somewhere a bit different. So I went to Orkney, but that was good. And now I'm really excited to go back and think about Matthew Venn again. I'll need to go back to Devon or Cornwall and get a sense of the place again. I was motivated because I did the Penzance Book Festival, which is right down in the south of Cornwall, and again, very beautiful. And I was lucky. I stayed with the patron is I think a wonderful literary author called Patrick Gale, who lives with his husband in this beautiful farm right down near Land's End. And the farm has been in Aidan's family for generations, I think. So it was great fun. I went to London and did lots of work with, met up with my publisher and did stuff then, and then got the sleeper train to Penzance, which is a very romantic thing to do. And it was a sunny, beautiful day. And we walked around, did the cliff walk, and then went into Penzance and did the gig, and then went back to the farmhouse to stay. So yeah, that fired me up to go back to the West Country because it was such a perfect time.
Oh, lovely. We went to see the Pirates of Penzance a few months ago. The only time I've ever been there, it was hard not to break into song.
Of course.
I know, but there we are. So Ian, come back and see if we have any questions or comments from the audience that Ann would like to hear about or address.
There are a few questions here. For the first one, we've had some little peeks into Vera's family. Do you have her full backstory in your mind, or is it an evolving thing?
No, I know exactly what her background is and who the family is and what happened to her mum, who was a village school teacher. And so Hector, her dad, who belonged to quite a member of the local gentry and lived in the big house, which is a big deal in rural Northumberland still. It's still very feudal. I have a cottage up there, and my neighbour still lives in a tied cottage. So when he stops working for the big house, he'll lose his home as well as his job. And and Hector was the younger son. So I guess like the spare, he wouldn't inherit the house or the estate, but he was expected to do something respectable. And instead he married the village school teacher and took to and then she died and he was left with his child that he really didn't want and neglected really. And that's how Vera became who she is, I think. And I'm wanting to go back and maybe flesh that out a bit in the next book, but I'm not there yet.
Oh, you have plenty of time to think about it after you've polished off Orkney and
And Matthew
dive back
Venn.
into Devon.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that answered a question I failed to ask you, was that the end of the TV series does not mean the end of your writing Vera novels.
No, I think at least one more Vera novel after this one. Yeah. It's been left quite open-ended. So I want to write at least one more.
Wonderful. Ian?
Next, if you could magically blink your eyes, where would you go and who would you spend the whole day with?
Oh, I think because it's summer and our summer has been so horrible here this year, I would go back to that sunny day in Penzance and walking on the cliff path there with Patrick and talking about books and writing and place and what a magical place the Southwest is.
Next, how do you deal with writer's block?
I go for long walks. I'm a great walker. So if I get stuck, I'm very lucky. I have this cottage up in the Northumberland Hills that I got after Tim died because I wanted somewhere different without any memories. So it's only very small, but I can walk out of my door there and walk all day on public footpaths on a bank holiday and not meet another soul. So on one of our main holidays, I can walk, and so it's very wild and very empty, and I love it. And that's a great way of sorting out plot difficulties. Another good thing to do, I think, is to go on a train journey, because if you're sat on a train, you can't really be doing anything else. You're looking out of the window, and I've sorted out a number of book problems while I'm on a train, but not like the train I was on today, which had mostly screaming toddlers in.
Oh dear. There are some wonderful train trips around Scotland. I mean, British Rail has got a lot of wonderful trips. Did you go to Agatha Christie's centenary in 1990? Were you
No.
there? Well, I went. That was the year I joined the British Crime Writers Association. And then, if you recall, we moved on to London. But the centenary coincided. I think the CWA decided to have its meeting at the same time. And if you recall your Agatha Christie, you know that Poirot and Miss Marple never actually met. But for this occasion, British Rail put on a bit of the Orient Express. They ran a special
Oh,
train.
amazing.
Right? It was amazing, down to London, and there's a little kind of a country station stop. I'm trying to remember wherever the town is, but anyway, so it's just a platform with, like a little umbrella cover or whatever it is. But we all went down and we assembled on the platform, and the train came in. This is just magical. I have photos of it. And then the car door opened, and Hercule Poirot, David Suchet, stepped out, and he had a beautiful bouquet of flowers with him. The other car door opened, and Miss Marple stepped out, and he walked over, bowed over her hand, flourishing the flowers, and said, "At last we meet." It was so wonderful. You had to
Yeah,
be
great
careful.
fun.
It was just, and I thought, I was interested that British Rail apparently had some kind of sense of humor, or they wouldn't actually have.
Well, that they do, yeah. I've been to the Christie Festival in her home in Greenway. So I
Right.
have been there and done the one in near Torquay as well.
Yeah, it was in Turkey. Thank you for reminding me of the name of the place where this whole thing happened. I actually got to dance with David Suchet in the evening
Wow.
banquet. He's about my size. So I think he asked me to dance because we could look at each other eye to eye. He didn't have to crane his neck up. It was great. Ian,
That's
anything
a great
else?
And finally, who are you a fan of? Anne?
Oh, so many people. I read so much crime. I suppose what we were just talking about, Iceland. I love Indridason, Arnaldur Indridason, who was perhaps the first crime writer that was translated into English. And I've just been sent two books, one recent one that I've not read and a proof. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll have to mention my friend Louise Penny because we're great mates, and I think there's certainly in the UK, her books are undervalued because people don't realize just how clever they are and that they're fables and that there are bits of magic realism in there too. And yeah, so I need to mention her, though she needs no mentioning for an American audience, I don't think. Who else do I love? At the moment, I've just read Will Dean's new Tuva mystery, which is called The Ice Town, set in Sweden, in very, very snowy Sweden.
Did you read The
Um,
Chamber?
I haven't read The Chamber. No, I'm more a Tuva fan, I think. I really love those books. So, and I think that's going to be televised too. I think there's a
I think it is. I did Will's American Book Lunch early in August and for the Chamber, and I think it's a really terrifying book.
Yeah, I think he does write very, but I love that central character that he's created. And I did enjoy, I think the Ice Town is probably one of the better ones in that series. I think it's really
Great.
good.
I love thinking of him as sitting there in the woods, the dark woods in Sweden, writing his crime novels and then
Yeah.
emerging to,
Oh, and I have to mention Mick Herron as well, who's terrific and who is also a Newcastle lad, and whose mother is the nicest woman you'll ever meet in your life.
Slow Horses is what has made Nick Herron an international star, but I liked his earlier books. I thought he wrote several really terrific books, which we imported from the UK before he ever wrote the first Slow Horses. And I'm
Yeah,
was
the
pleased.
Zoe Byrne ones, I'm
Mhm.
really getting into those too.
Yep, they were wonderful. And the good news is that since he's become a bestseller, I think that one or two of the early books has now become available in the US. And I'm really pleased about that because he's a versatile writer.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's great. Anything else, Ian?
That was the last one.
Wow. All right. Then I would like to say that we have autographed copies on sale tomorrow of The Dark Wives here. And we have some copies coming from London as well, but they take a little while. But anyway, you can order one or the other from the Poison Pen. And I want to wish you a wonderful publication week in London.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks very much for inviting me again to chat to your readers.
Well, I love it. I hope you'll come back and see us in Scottsdale, not in the summer.
No, not in the
No,
summer.
no, but it's always a pleasure. Thank you for making time for us, Ann. Much appreciated. Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Thanks for joining
Goodbye.
us.
And
Bye.
thanks, Ian. Bye.
You're welcome.
There we go. For some reason, there we go.